Camera, can you just do my slides for the entire talk? I'm going to have to walk back to progress the slides anyway, but... It's really interesting. We're rolling? Yes. Okay. This is the road ahead, unsolved problems in the security arena. Had I known how much the talk was going to change, I probably would have renamed it something like Security Sucks or something like that, but I missed the deadline to change the talk title. There we go. Okay, so this is not a technical talk. If you're expecting me to dig through some deep level artifact or talk about cryptography, you're in the wrong talk. That's tomorrow. What we are going to talk about is whether or not the security industry is actually being successful as an industry, whether or not we're actually protecting the people we need to, and then what some of the reasons why we may not be doing as good as we could. All right, so my name is Benjamin Tice. I'm a Bloomsburg University alumni. I graduated with a degree in digital forensics and another one in anthropology, which is an interesting combination. I'm a huge nerd. I play of the video games and I run of the Linux. I have never showed up to a LAN party running anything except Linux. I am currently batting for the blue team at a small company in Ashburn, Virginia. I am the blue team. I'm the entire blue team for that branch of the company. So I do everything from high-level security strategy all the way down to editing configuration files. There we go. As a security professional, are you responsible for A, protecting corporate assets, B, catching bad guys, C, protecting individuals, or D, protecting your country? Who here thinks it's A? Anybody for B? Anybody for C or D? Who here thinks it's E? Who is awake? Right, so I agree completely. I strongly believe that the answer is E. That we as people who have technical skills that regular people don't have a responsibility to use those skills to solve problems for these categories of people. Whether it be you're employed by a business, or you're trying to protect our government, you're trying to figure out how we can make individual people more secure, as well as catching bad guys, because we do a lot of that, right? So we have problems to solve, and the first step to finding a solution is admitting you have a problem. I'm going to admit I have rendering problems. Now that I've admitted that, I can try to figure out a solution. It turns out that going to the next slide and then going back helps. Okay? There we go. So we have a problem. So we say we're supposed to be protecting businesses, right? Right now, businesses are bleeding out $400 billion a year. That does not look... yes. That does not look like we're succeeding to me. I think we might have a problem. Okay? The arrest rate for computer crime is too low to measure meaningfully. Do we have anybody here who does incident response? Okay, we have a bunch of them. Keep your hand up if your incident response activities regularly result in arrests. Yours used to? What was your number of incidents to arrest rate? Okay, that's not quite what I meant when I said incident response. Right, it just doesn't. Almost never do we actually catch bad guys. Credit card numbers are still selling for less than $10 a pop. So really, really simple economics, right? Higher demand, right? So unless the demand for really cheap money has gone down, raise your hand if you would like some cheap money. Okay? Unless that demand has gone down, the fact that you can still go get a credit card number for $2 means that we're not protecting individuals. I could use many, many examples of that. That one's just one that's fun. And nation-state actors are still using Office macros. Russia hacked the DNC. And by hacked, we mean sent them an email and said, hey, you should really open this document. That's APT hacking right there, is macros and Office documents. We're in a competition, right? Offense gets stronger, defense gets stronger, defense gets stronger, offense gets stronger. What does that offense say about our defense? Right, we're failing as a nation if our enemies who are choosing to try to attack us and mess with our elections are just doing that. Oh, it worked. That's exciting. I think I've created a new form of artwork. Okay, so what that actually says is that if we can point out the source of our problems, we can work on making them better. If we can point out the reasons we're failing, we can start solving those as problems. Okay, so we're going to talk about 4 reasons. I just skipped a slide. 4 reasons why we fail. This is not an exhaustive list. There are a lot of reasons, but I'm going to pick on 4 of them today. Number 1, companies refuse to invest. Okay. As a blue team member, that's what I do. I'm restricted in terms of what I'm allowed to do. There are business rules that say we have to have VPN connections into other offices. We have to have macros because people use them. You can't have downtime for the network. Those prevent me from putting security things into practice. A great one is macros, right? It's the #1 thing for APT attackers. It's the #1 attack for espionage. And it's the #1 thing for ransomware. So why would you allow that to continue in your environment? Well, business rule. Cloud. As a blue team member, am I allowed to say, listen, don't put our data there, that's too valuable to outsource to somebody else? Are we allowed to say, listen, we can put some of our data up there, but we need to figure out how to log everything first. We need to figure out how to get some security controls in place first before you put data up there. Software approval, very similar thing. You're allowed to say, no, we're not going to use that technology. I can't secure that. Or that technology is going to put us at increased risk. Or does the business just do it? And then network restructuring, I mentioned downtime. Are you allowed to incur downtime to restructure the network? Are you allowed to restructure the network in a way that's going to be inconvenient for people? Right? There's potentially a bigger issue depending on where you're working. They might not have a blue team. It might be on the IT workflow that IT has to do the security compliance or whatever. I know that's a common situation for a lot of companies. If all you have is IT, they will never ever make you secure. Even if they have the technical knowledge to know how to do security, which IT generally doesn't, it's never going to be on the priority list. They're never going to have the time, and when something from security and something from IT conflict, IT will always win. Okay, so companies refuse to... There we go. That's mostly there. No, that's all wrong. Yeah, in this case, it's the fact that I'm using Linux, almost certainly. There we go. That's nice. All right, products are insecure by default. Security is an afterthought at best. I'm going to pick on 2 categories of things. The big one is Microsoft. Because if Microsoft had wanted to, they could have prevented almost all ransomware. Almost all ransomware is based on macros. By default, the settings that Microsoft ships for macros are insecure. Macros were never a good idea. Building the functionality that allows you to have automatic code execution just based on opening a file, closing a file, etc., was a really dumb idea. And they could have prevented almost all ransomware attacks. Okay. The other thing, do we have any red team members in here? Well, that's kind of sad. I was hoping somebody from the red team would show up. So go hunt down your local red team and ask them how they feel about Active Directory sometime. There is not a pen test that they get onto a box that they then do not abuse Active Directory and Cerberus to eventually get domain admin. It will happen. Why? Because as a protocol, Cerberus is broken. It's the authentication protocol used by Active Directory, and it is broken in so many different ways among so many different points, there is no way to secure it. And Microsoft hasn't updated it, hasn't replaced it. Another side point, Microsoft is the only company I know that routinely will ignore security vulnerabilities until they go public. So, another one, embedded products. Who here likes denial of service? I think it's kind of hilarious. The last couple of years, we've had the largest attacks ever in human history. Why? Embedded products with telnet open and hard-coded default credentials. Do you want DDoS? Because that's how you get DDoS. I had a meme for do you want DDoS, but it was mildly inappropriate, and this is a child-friendly con. All right, next reason. Most vendors sell smoke and mirrors, and businesses buy it. I apologize to anybody who works for one of those vendors, but most vendors sell their product, even if it's a good product. Most of them aren't, but even if it's a good product, they sell it like it's the easy button. They sell it like all you have to do is buy our product and you'll be secure. Whether it be our unified threat management firewall, whether it be our endpoint security thing, whether it be our SIM. They sell every product as if it's an easy button, and that's not how security works. Security is a combination of people, process, and technology together, in that order. Technology is valuable as part of a process being done by the right people. Right? And your businesses will try to automate all of us out of a job if they can. If the vendor makes them believe that buying a product will replace people, then they'll buy that product. Vendors also play to the latest trend, even if it's all smoke and mirrors, right? For example, the latest trend right now is machine learning. Machine learning. Okay, most of those products are a fancy GUI on top of something like k-means. Guess what? I learned how to do that in class. It's 4 lines of Python. Right? What you're paying for is the brand name and a fancy GUI on top of something you could do yourself. On this topic, please go watch Sacred Cash Cow Tipping from Black Hills Security. It is their yearly antivirus vendor roast, where they go through a bunch of different antivirus vendors and tell you what they had to do to bypass that AV vendor. Fun things like 32-bit interpreter will be detected, but if you do 64-bit interpreter, it won't be detected. That's the obfuscation that'll get you by antivirus. All right, next one. This is our last one. There's minimal government investment in defense. In terms of time and in terms of talent, who's being hired, almost all of it goes to offensive capabilities, not defensive. There's the big mindset in the government that somehow cyber security is like normal security, right? It's this battlefield mentality. If somebody's coming at me with a tank, I take my tank and I put it between me and them. And my offensive tank is serving a defensive purpose. But that is absolutely not how computer security works. That's not how network security works. It's either defensive or it's offensive, right? Very few are dual purpose. We have flawed compliance laws, right? We need to make compliance laws great again, because you can be compliant and not be secure. In fact, meeting compliance requirements doesn't even guarantee you a base level of security. And that's really sad, because compliance is one of those things that will push people to actually make their places secure. So if we can make compliance better, we can make a lot more places a lot more secure. And there are no product safety laws, right? The reason why we have massive denial of service is because we have insecure products. Why do we have insecure products? Because those businesses wanted to cut corners and save money. There we go. This is the Pinto. This is, in my opinion, Ford's most famous car. If you rear end a Pinto at low speeds, like 5 miles an hour, nice little fender bender, the gas tank ruptures and the Pinto catches on fire. So many people died from the Pinto that it caused our nation to pass auto safety regulations that meant you weren't allowed to sell a car that would explode. We need that for embedded systems. We need laws or precedent in court that are going to allow companies to be sued when their product security flaws cost somebody else money. Right. And lastly, our government actively sabotages encryption. Configuring something like SSH or something like TLS is a minefield, because there are lots of things that are in the standards that have to be there, that have to be supported by the libraries, because they're part of the standard, that have major flaws. For example, the NIST elliptical curves all have timing attacks. Why? Because you can't write a constant time implementation using that curve. right? It's just not practical to do. That means that your default configuration for SSH is insecure. Is it easy to exploit? No. Do we know that people do it? Yes. Our government has also put backdoors in some cryptography, right? They created the dual elliptical curve pseudo-random number generator. The fact that it's a pseudo-random number generator using public key cryptography should raise some alarms because yes, there is a secret value. And if you have that secret value and you see an output of the PRNG, you can predict all future outputs. This one was actively exploited by enemies of this country because the NSA built it, NIST standardized it, they put it into a bunch of libraries. Juniper Systems, who make NetScreen routers, put it as a backdoor, intentional backdoor, into their router. And then a couple years later, somebody broke into Juniper Systems, changed the curve to one they knew the secret for, and for that period of time, an unknown foreign intelligence was able to passively decrypt VPN traffic. Okay. Cryptographic backdoor, 2020 colorized. Anybody tell me what that is? Thermal exhaust port on the Death Star. Okay. As a blue team member, I need cryptography. I can't do my job without cryptography. I can't protect anybody or my business. I can't do anything without cryptography. Everything we do requires it. So if we have backdoor crypto, it's like trying to defend the Death Star. So, recap. First step to finding a solution is admitting you have a problem. The slide I couldn't get to render, pointing out the source of our problems lets us begin to work on them. These are just 4 examples of reasons why the security industry isn't doing what we hope it does, what we feel it should do. Okay? Those were lack of company investment, insecure products. You can't buy a product that's secure out of the default and actually does something. You get minimal Linux server, secure out of the box. You know why? It doesn't do anything yet. You get Linux desktop, it's insecure by default because it does something. And you know, I love Linux, so you know when I'm picking on it, it means there's actually a problem. Vendors sell smoke and mirrors, and companies will buy it, and there's minimal government investment in defense. So, questions, concerns, worries, fears, dreams, snide remarks. I know I'm a very energetic talker, but I'm actually a very friendly person, so please ask me questions. Okay, so here's the thing. I agree that we need to make people stop being so incredibly ignorant when it comes to computers and their own security. But we also need to start finding solutions that are going to protect people without them having to know highly technical things. And some of that is the tools we build need to be user-friendly, right? Like the classic example, nobody uses PGP. Why? It's a royal pain in the butt to use. Okay? People do use Signal. Why? It's not that hard to use, right? And there are a lot of systems that are going to need to be fixed, things that we're going to need to change, that are going to protect everybody across the board, even without them knowing. They're just going to use the technology, and the technology is going to be secure now instead of being insecure. So yes, user education is important, but we also need to figure out a way to protect users even if they have not that much education, right? It's important to protect grandma's credit cards as much as anybody else's. Other questions? We have 6 more minutes. So if nobody asks questions, I'm going to start telling quantum mechanics jokes. Looking at you. Come on, every time I'm in the audience and you're like, hey, does anybody have a question? I always ask you one. What was that, Andy? So audience has requested a quantum mechanics joke. So Schrodinger and Heisenberg are speeding down the road in a car. They get pulled over by the cops. And the cop says, do you know how fast you're going? And Heisenberg says, no, but I can tell you exactly where I was. The cop decides this is grounds for a search, so he has him pop the trunk. He says, hey, do you guys know you have a dead